Clair Obscur Expedition 33 is a turn-based role-playing game that came out in April of 2025 and promptly took the video gaming public by storm. I am coming to this very, very late. Everyone already played and gushed over this game last year, but what can I say? I was busy and it took me a while to get around to it. But I always meant to get around to it because the pitch is pretty irresistible. I am old, and the first games I really remember loving as a kid were old-school turn-based RPGs like Chrono Trigger and the old Final Fantasy games, where there's a discrete story with distinct characters, and you fought battles by cycling through menus. And as I got older, it was kind of sad to see this style of game go out of style, to the point where even modern Final Fantasy games are basically action games with some RPG elements thrown in. So the idea of a fully modern turn-based RPG with an epic fantasy story that won Game of the Year, I had to see what all the fuss was about. And the fuss is warranted. Clair Obscur is everything people say it is. It's wildly inventive, it's beautiful to look at, the soundtrack is spectacular, and the story is challenging in a way that a lot of game stories are not. By which I mean it's kind of a bummer. This is probably a good time to mention that I'm going to spoil everything about the game in this video, so please proceed with caution. Clair Obscur has 2 and only 2 endings, and they run the complete gamut of French emotions, from incredibly sad to deeply depressing. And I am all for that. I love that the developers are willing to get, dark and bleak and moody. I love that the game brings up all these murky moral questions about existence and life and death and doesn't really resolve them. In fact, the ambiguity is a big part of the reason the game sticks with you after you're done playing it. That said, when I finished the game, I couldn't help but think that it was forcing all the intense sadness just a little bit, and that there was a way for all the characters to more or less get what they want, and the game just chose not to give it to them. I want to outline what I mean, and maybe along the way get into some of the themes that Clair Obscur engages with, as well as some of the ones it kind of glosses over. You are now watching an episode of... Please like and subscribe. Very much thank you. To understand the ending of Clair Obscur, we first have to understand what happens leading up to it. So the first thing we're going to do is speed run the story. Things kick off in the island city of Lumière, which is kind of a sideways magical version of Paris, complete with melting Eiffel Tower. If you go down to the port and look across the water, you can see a giant woman sitting under a huge stone monolith with a number painted on it. And every year, the woman gets up, erases that number, and then paints a new one, counting down by 1 each time. This year, she paints the number 33. Then, everyone who's older than 33 years old, so 34 and up, disintegrates and wafts away on the wind. This is the Gommage. The giant woman is the paintress, and she has been pulling this shit for decades. For just as long, the people of Lumière have been sending out expeditions meant to confront the paintress and get her to knock it off already. This year, it's Expedition 33's turn to try their luck, which runs out very fast. Most of the expeditioners are slaughtered the moment they set foot on the mainland, killed by a mysterious old man named Renoir. The survivors become our core group of playable characters. There's Gustave, who is kind of the main guy, at least at first. There's a mission-minded sorceress type named Lune. There's a bruiser named Ciel, and there's Maëlle, the youngest expeditioner. They travel the continent, they meet a strange, delightful creature named Esquier, who almost runs away with the game.
What a hug.
And they generally make good progress until the next big twist. Renoir kills Gustave, our presumptive main character, which leaves a hole in the party that is quickly filled by a mysterious new guy named Verso. Verso and Gustave look weirdly similar, and it was very irritating to me that no one ever brings this up. Verso even inherits a few of Gustave's techniques and fills the same surrogate older brother role for Maëlle. I kept waiting for there to be a textual explanation for this, like somebody in the lore or mythology that explains why they look and act so similar, but there really isn't. They're just completely different people who happen to be twins. It's not that important. I don't know why it bothered me so much. Anyway, the new group continues their adventure and eventually defeats Renoir. And then they defeat the paintress, and then they return to Lumière a pack of heroes, which is when things get really weird. At this point, the game pulls a variation on the "it was all a dream" trope. The whole world that we have been exploring this whole time is actually a painting. Out in the real world, in real Paris, there is a family called the Descendres, and they are all magical painters who can paint magical canvases full of autonomous beings who can feel and live and laugh and love. Most of the characters in your party are painted people. They're not, real in the strictest sense. This also explains a lot of the cool surrealist touches in the game, like an area that seems to be underwater, but you're walking through it like it's not. It's not weird, it's just painted that way. Anyway, the Desandres have recently gone through a family crisis. The middle child, Verso, who is not the same as the Verso we play as in the game, we'll get to that, died in a fire. The family matriarch, Eileen, was so grief-stricken over this that she entered a canvas Verso painted as a kid, the only one he ever made, and paints into being all the people we meet in Lumiere. So characters like Lune and Ciel are her creations. Eileen is the paintress. Eileen also paints facsimile versions of her own family members, including Verso, and that is the Verso that we play as in the game. Kind of this resurrected version of her dead son that she painted to help her cope. The Renoir that we just beat the crap out of is a painted version of Eileen's actual husband, Renoir, who in the real world is trying to pull Eileen out of the canvas, because being in a canvas for too long is apparently deadly for painters. But Eileen is so deep in her grief that she doesn't really care anymore. It's actually the real Renoir who is gamaging everyone every year, because if he erases all of Eileen's creations, he'll exhaust her power and she'll be forced to leave the canvas. Whenever Eileen paints a new number on the monolith, that's her way of warning the people of Lumiere what's about to happen to them. She's using all of her energy to hold Renoir back, but it's a battle of attrition that she's slowly losing. But most of the people in our party do not know any of this. They just think the paintress has been killing people all this time. So after they kill the paintress and boot Eileen back into reality, Renoir gomages everybody, with a couple of key exceptions. So out in the real world, Renoir and Eileen have a pair of daughters, and the youngest is named Alicia. And while the game doesn't give us many details, it's implied that Alicia is at least partly responsible for the fire that killed her brother, although not out of malice. She was somehow manipulated by a shady group called the Writers. We don't get details on them either, really. And she feels incredibly guilty about the whole thing. And also, her face was badly scarred in the fire, and her voice box was burnt out of her throat, so she's suffered a lot. Anyway, Alicia enters Verso's canvas to try and help pull her mother out of her grief spiral. But magical paintings work in weird ways, and she ends up getting subsumed by the power of the canvas, and is reborn in Lumiere as a girl named Maëlle, the same Maëlle we've been playing as for the first 2 acts of the game. So Maëlle isn't gamaged along with everyone else because she can't be. She's a real person, she just didn't know it until now. Verso also doesn't get gamaged because Eileen painted all of her fake family members to basically be immortal. They can't die unless a painter gets right up in their face and it really lets them have it. So Maëlle now has the memories of Maëlle, the girl from Lumiere, and of Alicia, the real-life girl from real-life Paris. I'm going to call her Mylicia from now on, because she's basically a new character. And Mylicia, who is herself a paintress with all the power that implies, kind of decides that she prefers her life as Maëlle in the canvas to her life out in the real world, where she got her brother killed and is horribly disfigured and can't speak. She repaints Lune and Ciel back into existence and is now determined to fight against her father Renoir to stay here in the canvas where she can be happy. Renoir, on the other hand, wants to destroy the canvas completely because he thinks that both Eileen and now Alicia are basically using it as a way to avoid dealing with Verso's death. This canvas contains a piece of the real Verso's soul. That's how magical paintings work, everyone knows that. And they are clinging to that rather than moving on. They're not coping, it's not healthy, they're going to die if they stay in here too long, and Renoir is certain that if the canvas isn't destroyed, they'll just keep coming back to it, so it's gotta go. The kicker is that painted Verso now basically agrees with the real Renoir. And also, he's getting really tired of this existential nightmare that he's trapped in. Verso knows that he only exists as an imperfect copy of a dead guy. He's immortal and he hates it. He's fallen in love with expeditioners in the past only to see them die, and there's no prospect that things are going to get any better. He wants Eileen and Alicia to get better, but he also wants the canvas destroyed because then he won't have to deal with the eternal pain of his own existence. Life is suffering. So that brings us to the endings. Your group defeats the real Renoir, and afterwards Mylicia kind of talks him into letting her stay in the canvas.
Just a little longer.
And maybe against his better judgment, he chooses to trust her and leaves. But Painted Verso isn't buying it, so he challenges Maëlle to a duel. And in the game's final twist, you get to choose which character to play as in this confrontation, and the one you don't choose is the final boss. I chose Maëlle, mostly because I was still irritated that no one ever pointed out that Verso and Gustave look alike, and I wanted someone to pay. So I defeated Verso and got Maëlle's ending, A Life to Paint, where we pick up with her a while later after she's painted all the residents of Lumiere back to life, including Gustave. Verso, who is still alive despite being very clear about his wishes,
Unpaint me. Unpaint me. I don't want this life.
Does not look pleased. And the final shot is of Maelle's eyes clouding over with paint, implying that she is very much losing herself in the fantasy world, just like her mother did. It's bleak. If you choose to fight as Verso and defeat Maelle, you get the ending, A Life to Love, where the canvas is destroyed, all the characters we met over the course of the game are erased from existence, and we pick up with the Dissandras in the real world as they put the real Verso to rest. Mylesia, or maybe it's just Alicia now, this new name thing may have been a bad idea, is haunted by the memories of the happy life she lost. Oof, also bleak. So fans debate which of these endings is the good ending, or if there even is a good ending. I think it comes down to how you answer this question. Are the people in the canvas real? Like, are they living beings with a right to life, or are they glorified ink blots we shouldn't feel bad about wiping away, since they never really existed in the first place? For their part, the Dissandras obviously do not think of the painted people as real. Renoir thinks very little of wiping them all out of existence, and even when he's being nice to painted Verso,
What Aline did was unfair to you most of all. Please, accept the Dissandre family's apologies.
he still fully intends to obliterate this world to save his own family, thinking very little of all the painted families he's destroyed. Clea, the eldest Dissandra child, also makes her opinion very clear.
He's not Verso. He's a painted copy built from our mother's memories. You do well to remember that.
Even Aline is depicted as wanting to protect the canvas and everyone in it, not so much because she thinks they have inherent value, but because the canvas is helping her cope with her own emotional crisis. If she wasn't hung up on Verso's death, it's hard to know how she would feel. Give or take some optional content, Mylesia is really the only person in the game who ever argues that the canvas shouldn't be destroyed, because that would be unfair to the people who live in it.
You can't just decide this for everyone! What about Lune and Ciel and Monoko? What about Esquier?
But her empathy only goes so far. Like, if Mylesia really thought of the painted people as worthy of dignity and respect, she would probably honor Verso's wish to be unpainted, rather than turn him into, like, a piano-playing meat puppet in her ending. The Dissandras are the gods of this world, and they are not always benevolent deities. But even if they struggle to think of the painted people as real, I feel like we, the players, are supposed to. After all, we don't even learn that we're in a canvas until near the end of the story. So for most of the game, the painted characters are just characters to us, no qualifiers needed. And they have pasts that shape them as people. We learn about Lune's joyless childhood raised by her researcher parents. We learn that Ciel's husband died in a boating accident and that she suffered a miscarriage. People in the canvas can have kids. Monoko even has a foot fetish, just like freaks in our reality. So if the people in the canvas can be born and grow old and make connections and feel pain and procreate and live full lives, what does it matter how they came into existence? For all intents and purposes, they are as real as the Dissandras, which means it would be wrong to wipe them all out, right? And if that's true, then Verso's ending feels like by far the worst of the two, because in that ending, Renoir destroys the canvas, which means he commits, I don't know if I can say the G word on YouTube, and I don't want to be too flippant with it because this is a video game, not real life, but it does feel more or less appropriate.
God, Jenna, I told you not to buy that domain name. Say it out loud.
Genocide. Genocide. I'm not hearing it, Liz.
I mean, sure, in Maelle's ending, the Dissandra family falls apart and Verso has to live in existential pain, but the thousands of people living inside the canvas aren't exterminated, which I think is the more morally defensible option. Of course, if you don't think the painted people are real, then none of this applies, and Verso's ending is definitely the morally superior one. But I don't know, I think if it walks like a person, talks like a person, and has complicated emotional baggage like a person, then it's a person, even if it's made of paint, or chroma, or whatever. And I couldn't get it out of my head that there was a mostly happy ending that would have satisfied people on both sides of the debate, and the game kind of like purposely tiptoed around it. So it's hinted throughout the story that Maelle, or Alicia, or whatever we're calling her now, might be the only person who could find a way through this moral tangle.
Perhaps you'll find another way. You who have lived amongst us, your mother paints life, whilst your father, death. What will you paint?
But in her ending, she just repeats her mother's mistakes. So the game kind of tees up a more hopeful ending, and then hits us with a pair of downers. This is probably a good time to mention that Clair Obscur was made by Sandfall Interactive, a gaming studio from France.
That!
To be honest, I haven't taken in much French culture in my life, like some movies here and there over the years, but the stereotype is that their media is sad and melancholy, and they are not beating the allegations with this game.
Je suis garbage.
Although to be fair, while Sandfall CEO Guillaume Broche came up with a lot of the big ideas for the narrative, head writer Jennifer Svedberg-Yen is actually American, and she said that neither she nor Broche like happy endings. As she told IGN, "I think both of us were more in the brutal Game of Thrones, life is hard, that kind of mentality. And you don't need to be French to think that way, it just helps. But on the other hand, I don't think you can put this many mimes in your game and not expect people to read it through a French lens." Anyway, wherever the game's bleakness came from, Maëlle could have found a way through it if she were just a little less selfish and had a bit more backbone. The way I see it, the morally perfect ending to this game would have been for Renoir to allow Mylesia to stay in the canvas a little longer, but she would have had to unpaint Verso like he wants. We've seen that a painter from the real world can erase even people that Elaine painted to be immortal, and it's wrong to force Verso to continue on when it's so clearly against his wishes. And while Maëlle's ending implies that she's not really going back to the real world, she was just lying about that, eventually she's gonna have to suck it up. Like, learn ASL, move on, find a new purpose in life. Honestly, if Mylesia doesn't eventually return to the real world, I don't see what would prevent Renoir from just returning to the canvas and doing this all over again. So, better to take the time you need and then return to your reality, painful as it may be. That said, part of the reason she's hesitant to leave the canvas is because the second she does, Renoir will destroy it along with everyone who lives inside it. And as we've established, that would be wrong. So in this completely made up, perfect ending, Renoir would have to make some concessions too. So Renoir says that the canvas needs to be destroyed, because otherwise Aline and Alicia will just keep using it as an emotional crutch and endangering themselves in the process. But there are other ways around that. First up, it's long past time for therapy. Clair Obscur is set in the early 20th century, so Sigmund Freud and his disciples are around. The painters, the writers, the psychiatrists. Give them a call. We know the Dessandres can afford it. They live in a huge mansion with a clear view of the Eiffel Tower, for heaven's sake. And if you have to hide the canvas to keep Aline and Alicia from losing themselves in it, then do that. At one point, Alicia does hide the canvas, although we don't really know where or how. She seems to hide the canvas in the canvas itself, or maybe in another painted world, it's not really clear. But apparently, Aline will eventually find it there. Okay, so maybe ship it off to some storage facility and lose the receipt. Or just make finding new hiding places a regular part of your life. It would be worth it to save everyone in there from extermination. So that is my made-up good ending. And when I say good, I mean like morally good, not dramatically good. Dramatically, the real endings are much better, which is what matters. You know, Clair Obscur is a piece of art, not a moral instruction book, and I wouldn't have it any other way. But I just wanted to get that alternate ending out of my brain. Part of me wishes that Clair Obscur had more directly addressed the existential questions we talked about earlier. Are the painted people real? Do they have rights? What even is real? At one point, Renoir says that he and Aline
Painted hundreds of canvas worlds, pushing the very boundaries of creation.
Did they destroy any of those? How many civilizations have they eradicated? In a way, Clair Obscur gives us a fantasy version of a theme that a lot of sci-fi stories explore. Movies and shows like Blade Runner, Ex Machina, and Westworld all ask more or less the same question. How are we supposed to treat artificial life that is so advanced, it's basically indistinguishable from human life? The 2018 video game Detroit Become Human is about this too. Do sentient androids have civil rights? Play it and find out. Or there's that episode of Rick and Morty where Rick creates a micro-universe and then tricks the people who live there into making electricity he uses to power his car.
Hey, you gotta sign out! Nothing you do matters! Your existence is a lie!
And this theme seems more relevant than ever now that generative AI is blown up, and there are powerful people out there who seem to earnestly think that it could develop sentience and maybe kill us all. Like, is Claude conscious because it's showing symptoms of anxiety? I don't know, but it feels like the kind of thing that artists should be weighing in on. But when it comes to movies and books and games and stuff, I've always believed that you should review the thing that got made, not the thing that you wish had gotten made. And it's clear that Clair Obscur is less interested in questions like that and more interested in exploring the nature of grief. How do you move on? Can fantasy be your salvation, or is it a trap? And on those terms, it does a wonderful job. And who knows, if Sandfall makes a spin-off or a sequel, maybe they'll dig into some of these existential questions, or at least expand on the lore. I can't be the only person who wants to know what those loathsome writers are up to. Those types are always up to something.